Yeah, I'm still a big fan of Etienne. Him and Javonte Williams are neck and neck for me. I want to see landing spots because Travis Etienne, after even digging deeper, he's landing spot dependent for me.
Very much so.
If he lands on the Jets, if he lands in San Francisco, those are prime opportunities. But again, we're talking about a very accomplished runner here. Travis Etienne out of Clemson's ACC's all-time leading rusher with a career of 4,952 yards in 4 years. Very talented. I can remember as a true freshman, this is a guy who came out, played in 13 games, wasn't a starter, 107 carries, 766 yards, averaged over 7 yards a clip, 13 touchdowns. Only had 5 receptions because that wasn't a strong suit. Comes back again, ties the AC record, 26 touchdowns, 12 receptions, 78 yards. This is a guy who year in and year out produced. And you could argue his last year there was on the ground his worst year. Mm-hmm. But he did take a big step forward in the passing game. Throughout his career, he's got 78 total touchdowns in 4 years, with 16 of those going over 40 yards. This is a guy who is a 3-down runner, essentially. Like, he could be on the field at all times for you and help an NFL football team. I mean, he's got good hips. He's got good speed. His contact balance is really nice. He has the power enough to actually go through tackles. So he's not a weak runner.
Podcasts.
Yeah, he can power through
that podcast.
He shows some patience. He's got some really good cutting playing ability. He's a big play player. He's a big play player.
I definitely agree with that. He is a big play waiting to happen. I think that's where I think most of his value is getting him in space, letting him turn on his jets and kind of find a crease and go. Because I think he runs a little bit tentatively in between the tackles, and that it almost makes him look slow. I know he's not slow because I've seen him in the open field, but I just don't know if he doesn't move laterally well enough, or if his vision, if he's just being patient or what. But to me, he looks tentative. He doesn't look like he's not one of these guys that's going to find a hole and go. He's kind of like picking and choosing a little bit too much for me. But if you get him to the outside, you get him to the edge of the defense, I think that's where he finds a crease and he'll go, and that's where these big plays happen. And if it's a slower guy, it's a 3 to 5 yard gain. But with him, he's breaking off chunk plays, and I could see he has the speed and explosiveness. I think it's going to translate to the NFL because obviously the NFL game, there aren't a lot of big plays, but I think he is one of these guys that has the ability to at least translate that big play ability to the NFL.
I've been a big fan of Travis Etienne over the years, even coming into last year. Now this was before I did my deep tape dives and whatnot, but like he was at the tippy top of the class. He was right there with Dobbins and Swift and Taylor and all those guys. Like, it was a real debate as to who was going to be number one. And for a while I was favoring Etienne, and it ended up being Dobbins, and then he didn't even come out, so I didn't have to worry about it.
Yep.
All that being said, when I really sat down and dug into the tape this year, there were a lot of things, a lot of nuances that I picked up on, a lot of nuances that I noticed that have me a little more concerned. So we've already described him as a boom bust player, and my nerd score really kind of describes that. So he comes in at third on my nerd score, and he is just a hair behind Najee Harris at a 74.5. That's what he came in at. But if you look at his numbers, it's really, really interesting. So things like ability to break tackles, game speed, burst is absolutely elite. His burst is crazy. Like, all of these things, we're talking like 8s and 9s and things like that. But then there's other things like his vision, his elusiveness, pad level, physicality, pass protection. Those are all below average.
It's definitely an area of concern, I think, for Travis.
Yeah. What's nice about him, and I understand the wiggle aspect for a guy, because you would expect a guy like him to have a little bit more wiggle, the way just looking at his stats alone, right, and the way he's built. But to me, when I look at him is, we say when I scout players, I'm scouting players also on their skill set, but what do they bring to the fantasy football table, right? And when I look at Travis Etienne, I do look at a big-time player who's probably going to have some pretty good draft capital. He's probably going to be a second-round pick. I would love him on the Jets. I love him. He's not going to be there for San Francisco. They don't have a second-round pick, but I would love him on the Jets in the second round. I would love him there. Yeah. The outside zone scheme, get him on the outside, get him upfield, find an open field, and get up north. So to me, Etienne offers really nice high upside for fantasy football production, where I like Javonte Williams. I do. And I could see him being at, 25 carry a game guy, averaging right around 85 yards a game, somewhere around there, you know what I mean, which is nice. But that's good for about running back. I can see this now, like running back 19, which is a quality running back, right? Travis Etienne, outside zone scheme, number one running back in this offense, he will per game get you a couple big plays, right? Like he's going to translate to fantasy football production where maybe his yard per carry isn't as high, maybe, or his touches aren't as high, but the fantasy production should be there for a guy like Travis Etienne, where almost like for a while there when you owned Chris Johnson back in the day for the Titans, right? Like he wasn't like every time Chris Johnson ran the ball, it was like, okay. But then a couple times a game, boom, there it is, 75 yards and a touchdown or an 80-yard run. Or with him, the way he stepped up his reception, and this is a guy who took his receiving game up big time this year. 48 receptions, 588 yards, good for 12.3 yards per
That's
catch.
what it's really going to come down to for me is, and this is something I talked about with my nerd score. I don't factor it as high. Yes, we saw him really excel in the receiving game. He's going to have to go to a team that's going to use him. Now, their games are different, but they're going to have to use him like Alvin Kamara. Like that is his path to success. The 8 to 10 carries a game, because I don't think many teams are going to be giving him 20 carries a game.
No, I don't think he's built for that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think, but it's 8 to 10 carries a game, and then on top of that, another 5 receptions a game.
Yeah, if you get him in like one of these teams that loves to run screens to the running backs, or just get him the ball quickly out in space, I think that would be a great fit for him because he, even on big plays that he seemed, between the tackle, big plays, they were gaping holes that he was running through, and he was just able to go. And that's what he needs a lot of the times, I think, to have his big plays.
Yeah, and I mentioned it before, but the way he is going to win, his top speed is good. He ran that 4.4 flat. Like we're not concerned in the least, but it's that 0 to 60. That's what makes him special, and that is where if you told me 3 years from now he's one of the better running backs in the game, I don't think that's going to be the case, but if he was, that would be the reason, is because he can accelerate and then take contact pretty well and then go right back to 60, and that's what he does best. So if he goes to the right team, the right scheme, those are the tools that will make him that type of guy.
What did he weigh in on his pro day?
215.
215. So,
which I was shocked.
I found it really interesting that he didn't do any of the shuttles, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he is a very straight line type of guy. I don't think he moves all that well laterally. And I think that's running backs typically will avoid those kind of drills if they know that they're not going to test well in it.
But a guy like that, I mean, there's a lot of running backs that find success. I mean, like Derrick Henry's an example. Like he doesn't move well laterally. Derrick
Henry's a completely
different running back. I mean, but there's a lot of room for success at the NFL running back to be a one-cut runner. There's a couple of running backs here we're going to talk about today that are really fine one-cut, get up north in a hurry kind of runners, like Herbert. You know what I mean? Like there's room for success there. It's not. Is
there room for a no-cut runner? Because that's what I kind of feel like I don't know that he's even
for him
got
at the barbershop.
I don't even know if he's a cut runner. Like I just don't know.
Yeah,
he's a go straight guy, man.
I understand that as well. I think sometimes it's like we want every running back to have the perfect skill set. Right?
Sure.
Like we want you to be the Saquon Barkleys. We want you to be, because even like you mentioned, Alvin Kamara doesn't have that skill set. I think he could be a better, in between tackles runner than a guy like Alvin Kamara if needed. So to me, when I look at Travis Etienne I think there's a path for him to be a very successful fantasy football running back. So if he goes to a team like the Jets, for example, and say Javonte Williams goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would still keep Travis Etienne as my number 2 running back. If Javonte Williams goes to the Atlanta Falcons and then Travis Etienne went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would move Javonte Williams to my number 2 running back.
Sure.
They're very close for me. Like they're both very talented running backs. I like them both a lot. But the path to success and to success for me personally is fantasy football points. Like I did a video on Nyheim Hines. I think Nyheim Hines is a great video buy this year because of the opportunity and the cost value he offers in the fantasy football value. You know what I mean? Like there is value there. I say it all the time. Is Alvin Kamara the best running back in the NFL? Absolutely not. He's probably not even top 8. But he's absolutely one of the best fantasy football running backs in the game today. And that's why I like Travis Etienne.
And that's why I have to wait to see where he goes.
Yeah, and that's fair.
To find out exactly where he's going to settle. But right now he's 3rd. Is there some sort of opportunity like you just laid out that he could leapfrog and become number 2 in my? Yes.
He's not far behind
Right.
for you, is the point. And again, that's because
But for us, it's Najee.
It is
and
Najee and
Etienne
him.
battling.
Yeah. Yep.
For you, it's Javonte and Etienne.
It's Javonte. Yeah, because to me, Najee's still my clear-cut number 1 runner.
The last thing I'll say on him before we move on, the 215 was interesting because always before he was playing around 202, 205, like, is he actually a 215-pound guy? Because even watching him, like, he wasn't wearing that 215 well.
He wasn't.
Did
you see the pro day?
I did. I watched the pro
I watched
day.
it too.
And it didn't look like – it looked like he put on a lot of weight at the last minute just trying to bulk up.
We see that all the time.
You know, and so I don't think he's going to be wearing 215 at the NFL level.
He looked
I
like
think
he
he's
was
gonna be
wearing.
around-
He looked like he was wearing a sweatshirt.
It was. Yeah, exactly. So I think he's going to be more around that 205, which you could still get it done at 205. I'm not saying you can't, but you don't typically see somebody get 15 to 20 carries a game at 205.
He's got to be. I think we've said it 3 times now. He has to be utilized in the right scheme. But I think you would hope an NFL team that's going to draft him would do it for scheme. It's the reason why Cam Akers went over J.K. Dobbins in the draft. They felt Cam Akers fit their scheme better than J.K. Dobbins does, and that really is amongst all these players is where do they land? What scheme are they going into? Because a good scheme can make an average player great, and a bad scheme can make a very good player very average. So it is very important. And we'll be paying attention to it when we talk about it after the draft. But overall, top 3 rookie running back, and definitely in the upper tier.
For sure.
Because after that, we're dropping down.